City Council meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, February 1st, 2022, and it is 6 p.m. Today we have the Youth Council Board here today to jointly conduct the meeting. All right, we're gonna go down the line, and Miles, do you want to start? And we'll just have everybody introduce themselves.
I'm Miles Nelson.
I'm Emma Jex. I'm Addie Jensen.
I'm Chase Durham.
I'm Bryson Lundgren.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Now we are going to take roll call. Mayor Jim Miller, and then Mayor Pro Tem Christopher Karn, Michael McCumber. I'm gonna say these so wrong. Ryan Podeska, Chris Porter, Stephen Wilden. I don't. It's so bad.
More perfect.
Wilden. There we go. All right. All right. We will now have the prayer.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful that we're able to be gathered here this evening as leaders of the community and the youth council. And we ask thee to bless us that we'll be able to make good decisions for the betterment of our community and neighbors. And we ask thee to bless our first responders and those in the military, that they can be safe and protected, and those that are ill, they'll be able to recover from their illnesses quickly. And these things we say in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Audience, please rise. Join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will now have public input. This time has been set aside for the public to express ideas, concerns, and comments for the subject matter not listed on this agenda. We ask that you are respectful and limit comments to 3 minutes. Please state your name and your address at the very start. He taught me well before this. Just state your name and your address.
Good evening, and congratulations for being part of the our government tonight, young ladies and gentlemen. I'm Steve McCorkle, 438 Cimarron Avenue in Jacobs Ranch. I want to say in the last 12 years that we've lived here, the improvements in the city have just been marvelous. I mean, especially in our neck of the woods and stuff. And I guess first thing I'd like to mention is your YouTube videos are really bad. I don't know if any of you had a chance to look at the Planning Commission video from last Thursday. It was almost unwatchable. You know, it took me quite an effort to get through it and stuff. So, and I'm not a public speaker, so if I look nervous, I am. So, is there going to be public comments on the rec center and Foothills Boulevard presentation tonight? Then let me just go through my bullet points real quick then. Regarding the Foothills Boulevard, there's a developer who says he's going to give $10 million to the city for some reason. I'm sure it's to expedite things and all that sort of stuff. I don't know if it's to grease the wheels or whatever, but there was an arrangement made when Wander was created, so he could have a stoplight there at Riverside. And that is the biggest mess. And we just recently had an accident there where a woman was badly injured. So hopefully this developer is not going to get some special arrangement to have some special things done for his developments. So I'm going to be closely watching that, and hopefully that transaction will be transparent. So
Just to answer that, the $10 million is actually the developer pre-funding infrastructure so that his development doesn't impact everything as much as it would if we tried to build after. So it's not really giving it to the city, it's building the infrastructure he needs to do his development.
okay. That hasn't been explained, at least in the YouTube videos I've been able to endure. So, and also I want to give condolences to was it the previous mayor that his nephew was killed in an automobile crash? He was saying that at the end of it. And yeah, and so that was kind of an emotional thing, just hearing that and stuff. So anyway, but in that regard though, hopefully Foothill isn't going to get such a poor design as Redwood and that Riverside intersection and stuff. And yeah, at the time, actually, as you, Mayor Miller, that, and it was Congress or Councilwoman Bosch, I think, we were at one of the presentations for when they were planning the Pioneer Crossing intersection. Oh, my 3 minutes are up already. May I have another minute, please? And it was said that due to, him giving land for infrastructure and that sort of stuff, you guys guaranteed he'd have a stoplight there. But that has been such a bad design that, and at the time, UDOT said it was a city said it was UDOT, and I don't know. But anyway, the state said that there was land purchased around that intersection of Redwood and Pioneer that we were going to be able to develop in the future an intersection like Redwood and Bangor. That should be put on the fast track because that intersection just really sucks. So I have a number of things. Let me just do one more thing. For the rec center, I read through that whole presentation that they had. And one of the things that really intrigued me is that the location you're putting it at near the hot springs there. I think we have enough basketball courts with all the schools and that sort of stuff and the churches. Why don't we make a state-of-the-art swimming pool, diving pool, hot springs, that sort of thing? Really concentrate on that versus, basketball courts and that sort of thing. And you could also even make small racquetball courts inside there that could have multiple use, like racquetball, the pickleball, volleyball could all be used in smaller venues like that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thanks for listening.
Thank you on that. And just from the council, normally don't have the dialogue with it during the public meeting, but with the extension of Foothill Boulevard, staff has done a diligent job in working with UDOT because that's a future UDOT corridor. And so we're really working hard so they're not tearing out our work 2 years later and wasting money, and we can move forward and build quicker. So that road has been in the works. Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, design and stuff, 2+ years to get right away and stuff.
Yeah, at least 2+ years, but I think in the planning stages since for 10 years.
8 years, yeah.
8 or 10 years.
But the
yeah.
heavy planning to work.
We just
with
haven't
you.
had the funding until about, was it 2 or 3 years ago, we finally got the funding, so yeah.
One more thing on that boulevard, the planning commission, I believe it's the guy who's the head of it, really downplayed bike lanes and that sort of stuff. But I think that is something that could be really beneficial. I don't know if any of you are aware of the e-bike revolution that's going on now. I mean, I'm going to be 70 years old here pretty quick, and I've never had so much fun on my e-bike and stuff and going up to Costco and going 15 mile. I mean, it's just 2 cents.
Perfect. Thank you.
Is there a way I could use this PowerPoint?
Just as a public comment,
Yeah.
it would need to be emailed to us, or you can do your question and email it to them, but we can't.
Oh, okay. That's what they told me last time. So that's why I brought it this way. Honorable members of the council and mayor, my name is Sam Pede. I live at 352 West Fox Hollow Drive. I'm here to address House Bill 82, HOAs and accessory dwelling units, and the implementation of that with the city. before I go too far, and I've talked to Ken and others about this, does the city council have any opinion right now, negative or positive, as to the implementation of exempting HOAs out of rental restrictions via talking to HOA boards? Because in my presentation, I'm prepared to address, I believe that's an illegal and arbitrary method of going about implementing up to the 25%. But I wanted to see if that was unnecessary to go there, because the council and the mayor have already thought that that needs to be fixed.
So at this time, we're not going to do back and forth, provide your public comment. And so if you have a question like that, we can answer that later.
Okay, so basically, the new HB 82 and all of the rules and laws associated with it require that an HOA change their CCNRs in order to have a rental restriction. Unfortunately, that's not what happened here. Instead, it appears the city contacted the HOA boards. The boards did not give notice and comment periods. They did not speak to their members, and instead made an arbitrary decision of, this is what we're going to do. Now, as I'm sure the council and the manager and others know, that it's arbitrary unless there's substantial evidence behind it. I don't know what the substantial evidence for contacting HOA boards was, but effectively the city enabled the HOA boards to change rental restrictions without complying with the statutes. Specifically with 57-8A-209, which requires, again, a change in the CCNRs. The HOA board has their own liability with this related to their duties of loyalty, their duties of care and such. And I'm not naive when it comes to the law. I practiced law as a public servant for the last 14 years. I'm not here to be acrimonious. I just think that both the city and my specific HOA, Villages at Saratoga Springs, are currently operating outside of the law. I think the law requires, first, substantial evidence for the bases of how that 25% is determined. And then secondly, not to interfere with the contract that I have with the HOA, which requires them to make changes via covenant. Where we go from here, first off, I would ask that the board, and I spoke to the planning commission about this, the council, the mayor, everyone, recognize how this was an erroneous implementation, and it's understandable. As Ken would admit, there's not a lot of guidance in the statute. Could I have a brief more period of time? But the way that it was implemented was arbitrary. And what do we do from here? Well, the purpose of the statute was to increase housing and to empower property owners' rights. And so I would ask that as the mayor and the city council think about this, that they not use a statute that was meant to protect homeowners and housing rights as a shield to prevent those. Despite there being a lack of clarity in how this was to be rolled out in determining the words and meanings of phrases, that legislative intent to empower homeowners and to increase housing is what's going to be used to determine the meaning of those phrases. And I would argue to the council and to the mayor that the better method is to manage these things, is to, if HOAs truly want to have rental restrictions, they can do it through their CCNRs and then put appropriate regulations on rentals, which has largely already been done with parking requirements on property, separate entrances, having only homeowner ADUs, which I can promise you that a homeowner is going to be much more interested in ensuring that that property isn't damaged than the HOA is. They have to comply with building, fire, plumbing code provisions. And I believe that in doing this, the city can avoid expensive potential enforcement, avoid potential litigation, and maybe most importantly, honor the property rights of responsible landowners. My practice of law deals with enforcing the criminal law, and it's funny, like for example, with gun laws, we're often creating laws for people that don't really comply with the law, and that doesn't make sense here. Instead, empower homeowners by giving them reasonable restrictions on rentals that if they follow with, they can use their land as they deem appropriate. I appreciate the courts, I'm used to practicing law. I appreciate the council and the mayor's indulgence. And I want to congratulate all of the youth here for being able to participate in this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Hugh Watt, 2942 South Fox Point Drive. I'm also in support of what Mr. Sam P. just talked about. I've been concerned. As a resident 2 years ago, under the rules of allowing 4 unrelated people to live in my house, was approved. It was in the city rules. I could rent to 1 person or 2, depending on how many people lived in my home. That was available. Now this law has been updated with House Bill 82. I agree my HOA, the villages, does not have it in the CCNRs. They admit that at the last meeting, they don't. And so I think they misled the city council somehow, alluding to that they did or something along those lines. I don't believe if you're going to rule out the HOA, I think you should make them provide you where in the CCNRs it says they can do that. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Are there any more comments before I move on?
Say you're gonna close the public hearing.
We are now going to close the public hearing. And then,
Business item.
all right, our first business item is the election of Mayor Pro Tem.
And that is supposed to be Councilman Will.
Okay,
Okay.
I don't have anything to say.
You don't have anything to say?
I look forward to the mayor once again showing up to every meeting while I'm the mayor pro tem for 1 year. He doesn't trust me, so.
Okay, so just say you'll entertain.
How
a
was that
motion.
for a speech?
we will entertain the motion. I say of the election.
I move to elect Stephen Wilden as Mayor Pro Tem for 2022.
I second that.
We have a first from Councilman McComber,
Second from Councilman Carn.
second from Councilman Carn. Any other comments? All right, so I can see that.
I'm gonna vote with them.
Councilman Carn,
Aye.
Councilman Michael McCumber,
Aye.
Councilman Ryan Paduska,
Podesta.
Podesta.
Aye.
Okay. Councilman Chris Porter.
Aye.
Council member Stephen Wilden.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Just a preview of the next year, I vote by myself.
All right, do we have any reports from the council?
So I have a quick question, maybe on you're aware of the situation. There was for about 3 hours, 4 hours still when I came, there's ambulance and fire trucks in Wiltshire. Was there a gas leak or something?
I have not been made aware. I apologize. I can find out for you though.
Yeah, because when I drove by, I could smell gas and I know they were there for many hours. And just if I can get that information so I can help maybe squash rumors, that would be great.
We'll find out. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have 2 things. I know Councilman Porter and I requested a work session item next week. I think, Ken, you're working on that with Mark. And I know Councilman McComber, that's one of the things we've talked about as a council, seeing some of those work sessions come back. And it's a development. It may or may not work, but I think it's at least worth looking at as we're considering changes to our current code of what they're in 2 weeks.
Next meeting.
I presume.
Are you referring to the Title 19 amendments? No.
No.
The
HADCO.
The HADCO.
Behind Walgreens.
Yeah, I don't know for sure if that was scheduled. I know we were looking at the next meeting for
We're
that.
planning on the 15th.
Okay, well, let's just make sure it gets scheduled when it
Okay.
works for.
We are otherwise holding a work session where we will review the Title 19 amendments.
Okay. And then the other item, and Councilman Porter can speak to it as however he wants, but we met with Representative Moss last week, I think after council meeting. Again, just very supportive of the city, wants to keep in touch with us, as well as attending the league meeting. And as like every other year, the state's proposing a number of bills that significantly could impact the rights of cities, but I think the league has taken a position generally that we're supportive of on all the different bills at this time. Councilman Porter, anything to add to that?
No, I've communicated several times with Jefferson on a lot of these issues, so there's a lot of bills right now that the state's looking at that could affect us.
Mayor, I was just gonna say, Councilman Carn and I have been following the Utah Lake Authority and what its impact is and having a seat on it, as sitting on the board and just with the mayor's huddles to go over that. It's got some changes and things developing, so.
Yeah, there's a number of bills, as was mentioned, that we are monitoring with the league. I think the concern is preemption of local control or local control versus partnering. I think cities and counties were happy to partner with the state on solutions, but we're concerned about preempting local control and authority to dictate what's best for our area. So.
Yeah, and there was one bill I know the council and the mayor feel pretty strongly about, that they were going to mandate ranked choice voting for all cities, but they've reintroduced it to say, hey, now it's an option. It was an option before, so.
When did that change?
Like yesterday.
It was Tuesday morning. They
Okay,
changed
I've
right
been
before our
following
meeting.
that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was Monday morning.
There's an expected
morning.
So is
substitute.
it a
Whenever we
May,
have our meetings.
is it a May now in there? They may use it or?
Yeah, it's turning into a pilot.
It's basically a pilot now for state primaries, which I don't know why ranked choice voting, you
Okay.
do it for a primary because
Because it's already narrowed down
the purpose of
to,
a ranked choice vote, but whatever.
so just to point out for the youth council and for those maybe online or here, the reason why many in the council are against ranked choice voting is because it gives an unfair advantage to incumbents, in our opinion, because it's name recognition, and we're already incumbents and we want to make sure it's a fair playing field whenever there's an election. And we personally just feel that it's fair to have that as a traditional voting. It's worked for hundreds of years in this country, and we just feel like we need to stick with what works. But that's just some of our opinion. I don't know if it's a unanimous opinion. I haven't talked to everyone, but I think it's pretty closely unanimous. That's why.
Since you brought it up, I didn't get to do my tirade at ULCT because they had changed the bill, so I didn't get to say my spiel. But it also is mathematically problematic depending on the tallying. The way they tally the votes, you can get different results with the same ballots. And so specifically on multi-candidate races like we have in city councils, where we're electing 3 people on a single ballot, it's mathematically problematic. And so
It
that's
allows
another
for,
reason.
allows for corruption.
Well, and I would ask if it comes up again, Councilman Porter or I need to speak to it, like the endorsement of the council to basically say, hey, fine, leave it as an option. If some city wants to do it, great, but don't force it on people. The residents elected us to represent them and then overriding what the residents chose. So, I mean, that's kind of our position. I don't want to get into the mathematical conversation and I agree with Councilman Porter, but I don't want to get into that because some cities chose it. It worked kind of for them. And if they want to keep doing it, whatever. So.
I support that as a local choice issue.
Thanks.
I as well.
Is there any other ones? The budget one?
The budget transparency one has issues for me. I don't have the bill number in front of me.
Yeah, it's really long and complicated, and unless you're, I don't know, an attorney or a CPA, it's a little bit
So
challenging.
does it have to be passed
before you understand it?
Well, from my understanding, the intent is to make financial items more transparent. And so for increasing the budget item, it wants you to calculate if it's tied to consumer price index change, inflation, or if it's tied to blah, 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 blah. Well, the problem with CPI calculations is you can skew it a number of different ways to tell your story. And then you potentially have to make commentary on thousands of line items. I mean, year one can be a complete nightmare, I think, for our staff. After that, you'll see every city, it has the same comments in their budget literally every single year. That would never change because it's so many line items. So. And I think the league's currently neutral on that. There wasn't time to push back much on that, but if it rears its ugly head, we'll push back on it again.
I think they weren't sure whether it was moving. Hadn't come out of the rules.
I don't know. It's only one of like 5,000 bills probably at this
Right.
point, so.
All right, can we have the reports from the administration?
Yeah, Council Member McComber, it was a gas leak. They are cleaning up and finishing up at this time. No injuries that we're aware of, so.
It was developer caused?
Don't know yet.
Not yet?
Yeah, don't know details, so
If it is, we want to make sure they're accountable.
Yep. Will do. And then just to follow up from previous items, Parks reported that they installed pet waste bags in trash cans in Inlet Park. And then we have others ordered for Pinnacle Park, which was a concern of council members.
The Costco bags for the horses.
Still looking for solutions on that one, yes, but working towards it.
The
So,
horses use that park a lot. And the joke was we need the Costco bags for the horses instead of. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And then with that, we have police and fire reports in your packet. So if you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, that's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Oh, and I had a quick question. Is the, or this might be Jeremy, I'm not sure. Has the bike park started up above Sunrise Meadow? Are they moving dirt up there? I've had reports from residents. They're asking about dirt being moved. Is that the bike park? Perfect. Thank you.
Really quick, just forgot to mention, I had the chance Thursday last week to share with the Central Utah Water. They had a big conference with cities that are looking to implement metering, water saving features.
So they talked about that.
Yeah.
We were the only city that raised their hand to say, whatever, if the other cities don't get funded, fine, continue on with it. 'Cause we've already paid it. We're not getting any money back.
They had a conference. I was one of the speakers and they brought in some other speakers. A lot of cities were very interested in what they've done. They've asked to reach out to staff so they don't have to recreate the wheel. Thank you, Ann and Owen, for getting information when they changed it from a panel to a hour lecture the night before. Thank you.
Mayor,
Ken.
just briefly, I mentioned, I misspoke when I mentioned that our work session next meeting will include Title 19. That will actually be on March the 1st because we haven't yet gone to the Planning Commission, but that will happen this month. The work session will include, however, next week, a discussion or options to review for IADUs.
Consent items.
We're gonna break them out.
Which ones are we breaking?
1 through
out?
4.
1 through 4. So we'll just one at a time, just read what it is.
We'll just do the 5th one real fast.
Read this. Okay, we will now move on to consent items. The first one is West Ridge Estates Reimbursement Agreement, Richardson Development LLC, Resolution R2232122.
Discussed as comments from the council.
We have a motion.
I motion to approve West Ridge Estates Reimbursement Agreement, Richardson Development LLC, Resolution R22-3, dated today.
We have a first from Councilman Podeska and a second from Councilman McCumber. Any further discussion? Okay. Do I see? Okay. All right. Christopher Karn,
Aye.
Councilmember Michael McCumber,
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan Paduska.
Aye.
I'll get it right one time. Councilmember Chris Porter
Aye.
and Councilmember Stephen Weldon.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, number 2 is the Wellspring Subdivision Reimbursement Agreement, Security Home Mortgage LLC Resolution R22. Do I need to read the date? Dated today. Any discussion? All right, we can entertain a motion.
I motion that we pass Wellspring Subdivision Reimbursement Agreement, Security Home Mortgage LLC, Resolution R224, today's date.
All right, first from Councilman McCumber. Second. A second from Councilman Porter.
That's supposed to be me.
Oh, sorry. Any further discussion? All right, Councilmember Christopher Karn.
Aye.
There you go.
I encouraged him to, let us know how he feels about it.
Councilmember Michael McCumber,
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan Paduska,
Aye.
Councilmember Chris Porter,
Aye.
Councilmember Stephen Weldon.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. All right, number 3 is amendment to the interlocal agreement with Utah County for Mountain Lands Association of Governments, funding increase, Foothill Boulevard Extension Project Resolution R22-5, dated today's date.
Fusion between Cindy and I, and there was 2 items that were separate, and she's merged the documents. They were both related to Foothill, and so there was a little confusion. So I don't actually know. I guess we can approve the one that's on the agenda. So there was 2 things. Let me just start over. There was, if you remember, we went to MAG and got additional funding. So there was the interlocal with Utah County to approve the extra funding. But there was also a second item with our engineer on a change order for a lot of the extra work we've done. And so if you look at your packet, it's super confusing because the staff report talking about the change order increase with the engineer, and that's what's the resolution, but then it includes also the 2 agreements with Utah County, so it's a little confusing.
I just assumed they're all together.
Yeah.
So
I
do
don't
I.
know.
I'm okay voting on it together.
I don't know if we could
Are
approve
we
both. I have to ask Kevin maybe
Is
because
there a noticing issue?
there might, I mean, the notice is,
It's
what's
in
on the
here.
agenda is the interlocal with Utah County. So I think
It
there's,
says Foothill Boulevard Expansion Project.
Yeah.
which is,
That's still MAG though. There's a change order with the engineer,
Better to have the second half come.
we can
Let's
approve,
have the second half come.
but we want to go out to
Yeah,
bid. and
we
have
can
to wait for
approve-
that to go out to-
Oh.
Mayor and council, if I could offer a suggestion here. Jeremy's correct. I think technically we should approve the interlocal agreement with MAG. The question that remains would have to come back, I believe, which would be the budget amendment. Jeremy, quick question for you. I don't have it in front of me. How much is the change order for?
$280,000.
Okay, but it is within the current budget that we have approved, correct?
No budget amendment is required. It's just something for council's authorization.
So technically, Mayor and Council, that is something that I can approve via the change order process. So let's do this. If we could, let's have you take an action on the interlocal agreement, and then we'll circle back to the other item if that works for you.
Yeah, Jeremy, this is for the double turn lanes? Is this-
No, this is just for the extra $3 million. So if you remember, we only had 8.5 million approved initially through MAG. This increases the funding. So this is amending the agreement with Utah County so that we
Got it.
can get the
Okay.
reimbursement for the 11 million now. The 11.
Okay.
The other part will be done through. consent.
Yep, that's fine.
And Mayor, if I can too, just for purely educational purposes, you can approve what's on the agenda. If there's something in the packet that was not on the agenda, it really doesn't matter. It's only what was publicly noticed. So the item on the agenda is what you can approve tonight. And then we can work out the nuances when it comes to the budget and whether the actual separate contract amendment can be approved, like Mark mentioned.
Perfect.
All right, we will now entertain a motion.
I motion to approve the amendment to interlocal agreement with Utah County for Mountain Lands Association of Governments, MAG, funding increase, Foothill Boulevard Extension Project, Resolution R22-5, dated today.
I second.
We have a first from Councilman Porter, and then we have a second from Councilman Carn. All right. Councilman Carn,
Aye.
Councilman McCumber,
Aye.
Councilman Paduska.
Aye.
I'll never get that one right. Councilman Porter,
Aye.
Councilman Wilden.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right.
Mayor and council, real quickly, if we could at this moment, the budget, there currently is enough budget for us to approve these change orders. I believe we'll take a look at that. And so long as I can approve those within my change order authority, we'd like to move forward with those so that we can get the project out to bid. It doesn't require council formal action tonight, just more of at some point, we'll probably need to bring these items back as formal budget amendments once we get down the road. But I believe we have sufficient capacity in the current budget to move forward with those items, so long as the change orders are within my authority.
Great.
Thank you.
We did number 4.
No,
We're
that's
doing-
three.
Now.
We're on 4.
Okay. All right, the fourth one is the Lehigh North Shore Storm Drain Interlocal Agreement, Nazareth Avenue, 550 North, Outfall Resolution R226, dated today.
I move to approve the Lehigh North Shore Storm Drain Interlocal Agreement, Lazarette Avenue, 550 North, Outfall Resolution R22-6, dated today. I second that.
We have a first from Councilman Carn and a second from Councilman Padeska. All right. Councilmember Carn,
Aye.
Councilmember McCumber,
Aye.
Councilmember Padeska,
Aye.
Councilmember Porter,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilden.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I think we should let Steven do the last one.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Item number 5 is the city council meeting minutes for January 18th, 2022.
Here, you make the motion for me.
Oh, sweet.
Because I can.
I motion the city council meeting minutes for January 18th, 2022.
I second.
All right. We have a first from Councilmember Wilden and a second from Councilmember Carn.
Aye. Oh.
I got them all.
He jumped on that second. He played the game. That's good.
All right. Councilmember Carn,
Aye.
Councilmember McCumber,
Aye.
Councilmember Padeska,
Aye.
Councilmember Porter,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilden.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Oh, did you want to say aye? Go ahead.
Aye.
All right.
We'll now have a presentation from the Victus Advisors Recreation Center feasibility report.
This is one for you guys. This is
Mayor, Council, as you recall, we contracted with Victus Advisors back in September to run a feasibility study for a possibility of a recreation center, and they're here tonight to present their findings and the results of that study. So I'll introduce Brian Connolly with Victus Advisors, and then with Think Architecture, we have Jared Plozak and Rich Arabi. Okay. Okay, I'll turn the time over to them.
So real quick, I just want to let you know that you might be his boss during the week, but today he's your boss.
No comment on that. Just remember, I'll be your boss again on Monday.
Yes. In an hour.
Oops. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for having us this evening. It's our pleasure to be here. My name is Brian Connolly with Victus Advisors, and we led the needs assessment and feasibility study over the last couple of months for a potential indoor recreation center in Saratoga Springs. Just to give you an overview of the methodology that we undertook over the past 3 to 4 months, we started off with an extensive market research phase. So that included secondary market research, demographic and recreation trends, analysis of existing programs and recreation services and facilities in the area, an analysis of comparable recreation centers in Utah County, as well as primary market research and engagement, which included a public information session, stakeholder interviews, focus groups, and an online survey. So after about 6 to 8 weeks of research, we put all of that data and input together to make recommendations in terms of identification of indoor recreation needs among Saratoga Springs citizens. We put together a preliminary cost estimate for the facility. Our partners from Think Architecture put together some preliminary concept plans based upon the needs assessment. And then we ran the numbers in terms of potential program and usage that could occur within the building, the revenues and expenses for the building, and also analyzed potential funding options based upon what other communities in Utah County have done to build public recreation centers. Ultimately, our final report, which I believe is included in the packet online tonight, was an assessment of a true assessment of feasibility. So is there a demand for this type of facility? Is there a need for this type of facility? If so, how does that look? What could it cost? And ultimately, what are the options that could be presented to the community in terms of whether to move forward or not and how? Just to give you a summary of some of our key takeaways from our research phases, our analysis of demographic trends, looking at the city of Saratoga Springs, 41% of the population within Saratoga Springs is under 18, which is much higher than the national average. Both Saratoga Springs and Utah County have a significantly higher percentage of households with children. These are all things that are generally positive indicators for family recreation demand. There's a significantly lower median age within both Saratoga Springs and Utah County than the national average. This probably isn't news to most of you. Saratoga Springs and Utah County have a projected population growth that is also much higher than the national average. And then lastly, median household income within Saratoga Springs is also significantly higher than the US median household income, and even higher when you look at cost of living factors as well. So these are all indicators that tend to bode well for not only need and demand for indoor recreation, family-focused indoor recreation, as well as the disposable income to potentially be put towards recreation. In terms of the existing recreation programs in Saratoga Springs that are run by the recreation department, this is a chart that shows participation in recreation programs each year going back to 2014. As you can see, it was pretty much a steady line up until 1920, which is when COVID impacted that. The following year, it bounced back right on the trend line. That is incredible growth over a 6-year period, 6 to 7 year period, almost quadrupling the number of participants within recreation programs in 6 to 7 years. In terms of facility usage, so obviously in order to offer and for people to participate in recreational programs, they have to be hosted somewhere. When it comes to outdoor programming, the majority of the recreational programming provided takes place at city-owned facilities. Obviously, Patriot Park was a significant outdoor facility that was built in recent years by the city. But when it comes to indoor, you'll notice all of those in gray. Right now, the city is essentially fully dependent on the Alpine School District and being able to have access to their facilities and pay to rent their facilities in order to be able to put on indoor recreational program. You also notice that The vast majority of those that are put on are basketball right now, based upon our analysis of the recreation department, the indoor offerings and discussions with leadership of the recreation department. They are limited in what they can offer right now because of the lack of facilities on an indoor basis. Another thing we did was look at some comparable recreation centers within Utah County. When we conducted our interviews.
Sorry to
and-
interrupt. I just want to point out something because there was some people in public comment. I just want to point out, maybe they're looking the list. Not every school allows us to use their facilities, and the principals at the schools are able to tell us no. They're able to tell the tax-paying residents of Saratoga Springs no. So just because there are schools here doesn't mean we get to use them.
Correct.
And we have one school in particular who chooses to rent his space to a private entity instead of to a public entity, a for-profit organization versus us. So it's very important that we understand that we are at the will of not the Alpine School District, but each of these individual principals.
Correct.
It's really a very poor model.
And you're at their whims year to year. I mean, it's.
And it can change year to year.
Exactly.
A new principal comes in, we lost a school.
Yeah,
that no
and we
longer
worked a
allows
lot of communities that are growing rapidly, especially in Utah. And what tends to happen is when the communities are smaller, there's plenty of room in the school district facilities. And as the population grows, they're having more and more of their own school district programs in there, and all of a sudden there is no extra time to rent. So
thank you. Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, that was an excellent point. In terms of the comparable recreation centers, based upon all of our interviews and market research that we conducted, these were the 5 public recreation centers that your residents are utilizing most often. So there's a slide a little bit later where we asked, how often do you leave the city to visit an indoor recreation center? Where are you going most often? But these were the 5 that were identified most as ones that your residents are frequenting now and paying to use now. So Lehigh, American Fork, Pleasant Grove, Orem, and Provo. When we interviewed them, we had questions we asked the operators, but we also asked them to provide financial operating data and other details like that. We specifically asked for 2019 to get a sense of their operations prior to the pandemic. In terms of the amenities that these facilities have, there was a lot of consistency across them in terms of the major elements. So all 5 of these facilities had at least one multi-purpose gymnasium. Whenever we talk about gymnasiums and indoor rec centers, we always say multi-purpose because it's not just basketball. There's volleyball, pickleball is often played in these facilities. Some do indoor tennis. A sport called futsal, which is an indoor version of soccer played on hard courts, is becoming more and more popular. And also just for community events, you can have job fairs in there, science fairs, things like that. So multi-purpose gymnasium, they all had at least one multi-purpose gymnasium. They all had a walking or running track. They all had weight rooms, cardio, multi-purpose fitness class type rooms. And then they all, which is important for family-focused recreation centers, had a childcare option within the facility. From an aquatic standpoint, 4 of the facilities had lap-specific pools, and then 3 of the facilities also had indoor leisure pools, which tend to be focused on family, again, usage.
Pleasant Grove had neither. Pleasant Grove has neither. Interesting.
Yeah, Pleasant Grove is a smaller facility. In terms of our community outreach, just to give you a quick overview, we conducted a public information session at the beginning of the process. We conducted one-on-one stakeholder interviews. We did some focus group interviews as well with larger groups. In all, we completed 9 stakeholder interviews, 16 focus group interviews. We set up an email address that citizens could submit comments following the public information session, gathered about 78 emails from individuals. And then lastly, we completed an online survey with Saratoga Springs residents. There were about 2,370 respondents. Some of those trickled out through the survey. So about 75% of the respondents, or nearly 1,800, completed every question of the survey, as we show you some of the results. In terms of those interviews and focus groups, before we did the survey, some of the key takeaways from those Most of the people we spoke with agreed that the city's residents are currently underserved when it comes to available indoor recreation space. And the majority of the interviewees also felt that the top two priorities within the community seem to be more multi-purpose gym type space, and then some sort of pool option. A few of the respondents felt that, and we heard a comment about that earlier, that schools and church and private gyms should have enough courts available to meet the demand for indoor recreation space. But as Councilman McComber said, that's not always the case, even if the gyms are there.
And public can't use churches.
Exactly. And so many people said that, the schools don't necessarily provide open access for rentals, private rental rates. If you're a private group, sometimes those rates can be prohibitive. So it's not always that simple to be able to get access to those.
Can't run
facilities.
public programs in churches.
Exactly. There was some discussion, several interviewees cited private gyms such as Vasa as really the only options for indoor fitness in Saratoga Springs, but several noted that you have to be at least 18 years of age or else accompanied by a parent or guardian in order to work out there, which limits access to young families, which, as we showed you before, there are quite a lot of in this community. And some others felt that, clubs such as that tend to focus more on, they don't necessarily cater to the casual fitness enthusiasts. Another topic that came up quite a bit in our stakeholder interviews were, there were some respondents that had concerns over whether or not a public recreation center could potentially compete with private facilities and for-profit facilities. But a number of other respondents countered that, the primary users of public recreation centers tend to be these young families whose needs aren't being served by some of these private facilities. And furthermore, when it comes to indoor recreational programs from a sports standpoint, like basketball, volleyball, those recreational programs tend to serve a different need and a different athlete than a private club volleyball team or basketball team through their facilities.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment with that as well. So I'm a partial owner of one of the state's largest volleyball clubs, and we pull, basically our athletes range from Nephi on up to Idaho and Wyoming. And just in Utah County, we have already 5 rec centers, and you have Salt Lake County and stuff like that. And so whenever a new rec center goes in, we don't see our numbers go down at our club. And we have basketball and volleyball alike. And so it's different demographics. So I just want to point out that not in favor for or against a rec center, but just to that point of, does it pillage from the private sector? And we see growth every year as these amenities throughout the state get built.
We've found in some of our research that in some cases, having that recreational option actually keeps kids playing those sports who might otherwise feel uncomfortable at being competitive at a younger age.
And those who maybe find out that they want to do it more.
Correct.
And then
and then it actually becomes an additional pipeline eventually as they get older.
And same with fitness. So we also, not part of our company, but we sublease to a fitness gym, and they do world-class athletes there and weightlifting, which doesn't fit the demographic for a rec center. So the private sector continues to grow regardless of rec centers going in.
Okay. Thank you. So in terms of the common arguments we heard from people that were for this concept of an indoor recreation center, the supporters tended to feel that an indoor recreation center could improve physical, social, and emotional well-being within the community, improve overall quality of life within Saratoga Springs, and make the community more appealing to both current and future residents. And it was mentioned quite often that Saratoga Springs families currently have to travel outside of the city to access these facilities in places like Orem and Lehigh and other public recreation centers in Utah County. The common arguments against, again, were these ideas of, expressing potential concern if government provided a service that could be provided by the private sector or that might compete with existing private businesses, making sure we take a close look at that. And then there were others that were concerned with the idea of using public funds to build a new recreation center if that meant potential tax increases. So those were kind of the two most common things that came up from people that weren't necessarily sure about the idea. In terms of the online survey that we conducted, just a couple of information items from that we thought were noteworthy. This was a initial question we asked all the respondents. So about 1,900 respondents were the base for this one. We asked people to rate their overall impressions and overall satisfaction with indoor recreation opportunities in Saratoga Springs. So the percentage in green on the left, we use a scale of 1 to 7. That's people that said 6 or 7 in terms of maximum satisfaction. On the right, the red, that's anybody who gave a 1, 2, or 3, which is below neutral in a 7-point scale. So green, good, very satisfied, bottom 3 box, not very satisfied. The scores overall were very poor in terms of people's satisfaction with their opportunities for indoor recreation across the board. And it reflected that people just didn't have access to indoor recreation opportunities within the city of Saratoga Springs and felt that they had to travel outside to access those. The frequency of travel for indoor recreation, the base on this question was again almost 1,900 respondents. 37% of the respondents indicated that they have to leave the city on a weekly basis to participate in indoor recreational activities. Another 19% said they do it on a monthly basis. So over half the respondents indicated that they were frequently having to leave to access indoor recreation. We asked them if a new public indoor recreation center was built here, how would you rank your interest in using certain amenities? And we had a long list of amenities that are common for these types of facilities across the country. The ones that rose to the top and really these were consistent across all the different forms of research we did, not just the survey. An indoor pool for recreational and family use and an indoor pool for lap swimming were at the top. After that, it was a mix of youth sports programs being a high priority, an indoor track for walking and running, other cardio equipment, fitness programs and classes, weight rooms, all of that's kind of fitness and cardio type elements. And then additional gym space for basketball.
Excuse me really quick. I would just like to say, like, from my point of view as like maybe somebody who'd be partaking from these more often than maybe some adults who are here, is like there are lots of times where me or a lot of people I know fall out of a sport or something like that because we don't feel like maybe we want to put the money into a private yet before like maybe practicing a little bit at like a lower, I don't know, less stakes.
Less competitive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't know. I just know a lot of people end up giving up on certain things that they're interested in just because they're like, I have to focus on this other thing because I'm not very good at that. And I have to go 30 minutes away to try to even practice, like even just practice in the middle of the week. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Yeah. And my oldest child is 9 years old and, we have her in recreational programs right now because we don't want her to be forced into focusing on one sport at such a young age. We want to make sure that she can try whatever she wants to try in a recreational, non-competitive setting. So as she does get older, she can choose from all these different options that she's tried when she is ready to focus on something competitively.
And I'd like to add to that too, in the standpoint that not only is it helpful for them to enter at a lower competitive stage to see if they like it, but I also hear the comment that why doesn't the private sector do this? Like leave it to the private sector to build like these gyms and whatnot. And more with this market today, it's cost prohibitive for us to build those in the private market. So for example, just between our two facilities for my company, we're spending over 100 grand in facility costs and then another 190 in payroll costs. And so that gets trickled down to the fees for those athletes to pay. And so, for a season, our elite athletes are paying anywhere from $800 to $1,200 plus travel and all that. And so it's getting cost prohibitive for demographics to afford private club settings. And so we're also seeing that with real estate going up, we can't find anything that's under $1 a square foot.
Yeah.
And that's beyond our price point to be able to afford that in the private sector.
Yeah.
And so something like this to where it's making it affordable for people to participate in sports. And I'm a huge advocate for youth sports because every year, we probably get about 2 to 3 letters from parents that thank us for having their students in the programs that would have committed suicide that year if they didn't. So seeing COVID going through those years is difficult because we lost 2 of our athletes that way. But the years before that and the year after, we do get those letters where the parents think, but just saying that the youth sports is so important in the private sector or in the public. Doesn't matter the sector, but I just know that it's something that they need. And the support system that they build, the team work that they build. We hear from college coaches all the time that they love getting youth from Utah because not only do they know how to play the sport, but they have learned to build character in these things. So I just couldn't go without putting a plug in for that. That's just how important youth sports are, and kind of ruling out the discussion of private or public, just focusing on what it does for the youth here in the state. So.
Just a comment to that point, kind of not in disagreement, but just kind of shed light both directions. I do agree the youth sports are important. I'm involved either coaching or assisting every youth sport my kids are in so far. But when we had private entities come in and look at doing a rec center, they talked about, we asked, hey, are you going to do a pool? And they're like, pools are money losers. They're losers. They're pits. They wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I see you nodding your heads because it's true. So I think that's something we have to consider too. I personally wouldn't invest my money into a dumpster fire for the sake of doing it. So we've got to balance out community need and the fact that we know this is a giant black hole of expense. So that was my comment.
No, and that's a valid point. I mean, the calculus for a private sector to build a project like this, like Councilman Poduska said, the more money they have to spend on building it, the higher price they need to charge to make their return on investment. And at some point, the price they have to charge becomes too much for the majority of the community to afford, and the numbers don't work and the return on investment isn't there. Doesn't mean there isn't a need or demand for participation in these programs, but private sector won't step up if the numbers don't make sense from a return on investment standpoint.
And I think that's where we, being responsible for the tax dollars, need to look at that. Say if the private sectors are saying, where's that balance of meeting the public need without indebting the city beyond reasonable accommodations for it.
We asked the respondents, generally speaking, so private, before introducing any potential costs or anything like that, whether they supported the idea of the city building a new public indoor recreation center. And this is important for primary use by the residents and families of Saratoga Springs. About 89% of, in this case of almost 1,800 respondents, indicated that yes, they support the concept. Then we asked some questions about, we wanted to be thorough and very honest about the fact that this isn't just a free rec center, that there's obviously costs associated with everything. And there's the cost to build it. And then there's the cost to operate and maintain it. Typically with these types of facilities, those are sort of 2 different buckets. Where does the money come to build it and pay for the construction of the facility? And then when it comes to operating the facility, there's typically membership fees and daily use fees and program fees and all these things that from our conversations with your citizens, they're well aware of because they're paying those to other cities right now to use their recreation center. So I'll talk, some of the questions we asked were about, for example, when it comes to paying for construction of the facility, what would the respondents be willing to pay if one of the options for paying for the building was increasing property taxes? So we gave them some scenarios where we said, if property taxes were, the city portion of property taxes were increased by 60%, which we estimated about $240 per year per household. Or if it was a 40% increase, which we estimated about $160 per year per household, or if it was a 20% increase, which we estimated about $80 per year per household. What was their level of willingness to pay new taxes, incremental taxes to support this concept? So we started higher, and then we kind of dropped to 40 and then dropped to 20 in tested levels. So they were always given the option to say, no, we would not support this at all. At the highest increase, about $240 per home per year, about 31% said definitely we would support this at that level. About 16% said absolutely not, we would not support. 84% overall had some level of interest. We dropped that to 40. The would not support dropped to about 12%. The definitely support increased to about 42%. We dropped that again to 20% increase, about $80 per home per year. At that level, almost 2/3 of the respondents said definitely, and about 8% said would not. So we use similar methodologies for questions like this, in a lot of different communities and a lot of different types of venues, and we would call this very, very high support. Just to be.
I think it's just important to emphasize what you said as we're talking about the city's portion of the property tax.
Correct.
Because we've talked about the city's done property decreases for years, property tax decreases for years, and people are like, well, my bill has never gone down. Well, we're a very small portion of the city in relation to the Alpine School District. And county significantly larger. So I just want, and I'm glad you emphasized that, but if you said, hey, would you support increasing your total property tax by 60%?
Yeah.
I think everyone would say no, except for, Councilman Podeska.
Yeah.
Because he's just rolling in his dough in the partnership there. No, but anyway, thank you. I wanted to make sure that
We
was
were very,
emphasized.
very cautious in the way we wrote that question so that it repeated it multiple times, emphasized the city's portion, what that translated to in terms of actual dollars each year. And so,
Yeah.
And then we wanted to be clear that, look, that's just to build it. When it's open, in order, the goal for a lot of these facilities, once they're open and how they operate and how much of it pays for itself, meaning, the revenue generated from operations, does that pay all the expenses, or do additional general funds have to be put towards operations or some other tax public source?
Hey, real quick, before we move on to any other section, I want to be recognized that when we say only 8% said no, it just needs to be called out that that's 8% of the people who took the survey.
Correct.
Not citizens of Saratoga Springs, not voters, not likely voters. It's people who were rallied by their friends to take the survey on a recreation center.
They opted in.
They opted in to take the survey, correct?
Correct.
So I do feel like, and I fully appreciate the work that was done here, and I see so much value in it. I do think that
it comes out to about
results will
5
be
or 6% of the population.
Yeah, the results will be skewed to people who want a rec center. That's right.
It was about 6% of the population
Correct,
participated.
Right.
That's.
Yeah, Jared.
But on the flip side of that, there was also not a huge group that came out in opposition to it as well. So you kind of have to weigh that out as well to say, there wasn't a huge group that came out and said, we're absolutely not going to do this, and let's rally the troops and say, no, we don't want this.
And so we have seen that.
Yeah,
we
we've
did a
seen that in
similar
a lot
study a
of
couple
cities.
years ago in Davis County, and an anti-group came out strong. It is, that much positive turnout is meaningful.
You've asked the same question. I mean, I was pretty hard on you the other day when you went through this, but you've asked the same question to other cities, and you had a similar 5 or 6% response rate. But these are much higher numbers.
Actually, usually lower than that, 5 to
Right,
6,
so
to be
then
honest.
these numbers are even higher with even, with a better proportion in amount
Yeah.
of service.
You know, Davis County, we did a similar study a couple of years ago. That was countywide. And we got nowhere close to, that 5 to 6%. And a large chunk of the people that responded were against it. So, so to us, that in itself is somewhat meaningful.
Saratoga Springs residents love to voice their thoughts. So you're gonna get good survey
Absolutely.
responses.
Yeah. 5 to 6% for a survey promoted through just through community channels with about a 2-week window to respond.
Annalise is good
It's
at
quite
promoting
high.
things through our social channels.
Yeah, it's quite high. So, like I said, the other thing is willingness to pay an annual membership fee. The communities we work on these, we're based here in Utah. We work on a lot of projects in Utah, but we also do projects. We've done similar studies in 35 other states in the last 10 years. Every community is different in how they approach that second piece, that second bucket in terms of the operations. There's some where they say, "Oh, it's fine. We'll chip in $1 million a year in general funds just to keep this thing afloat, and we're going to charge everybody $5 for the whole year." I mean, or it's entirely free. We worked on projects where it's if you're a resident and you show your ID, it's free. In Utah, that doesn't tend to be the approach. Exactly. And so typically what the goal is can this facility be self-sustaining without tapping into additional public dollars? When I say additional, I mean in addition to the cost of paying for the construction to build it. And that tends to be more so the goal is can it be self-sustaining on an annual basis? And this is how they become self-sustaining in a large part is by annual memberships.
Just kind of to point out, you're talking about the recreation program self-sustaining. Heston's run our programs here in the city, so more just for record, he's done extremely well at doing that since he came to the city, got our programs going. It's constantly doubling and growing in size, and I think it's often underappreciated by residents, the work that he does. And it's not a burden on our tax system because he's able to make cost-effective and affordable programs for the youth. And so we have confidence from that aspect that those programs can self-fund under that leadership. So just for the record.
Yep. So we asked about, we gave them a sense in the survey of here's what other recreation centers in Utah County, some that you may be familiar with, here's what they're charging for different types of memberships. An annual family membership, an annual adult membership, a day pass, things like that. So we gave them a sense of what those costs were. And then we said, how likely are you to pay for annual membership prices at similar prices as other Utah County recreation centers? Similar responses to the tax questions. About 12% said they would not. 34% were definitely about, 2/3 were either definitely or likely to pay those additional fees. And these are really important as we put together our operating model for the facility. Is that level of support there to pay the fees necessary to help it be self-sustaining?
I think I asked this when you presented at the retreat, but I'm going to ask it again so it's on the record. What is the normal absorption rate like for in a city? What as far as what percentage of residents
Like normal.
actually join a member or have a membership?
Yeah,
or-
we have that in the full report. We looked at all the comparable facilities and it ranged from about 10% to 20%.
And then the survey is saying we're gonna 34%, or I'm just saying that, people may be overestimating their.
Yeah, and we didn't use
participation.
that high. We didn't
Right.
use that high of a percentage when we put together our operating model.
Understood.
Yeah, we actually used, I think about 15% as a baseline. Yeah. And what's interesting is those lower usage rates tended to be the older, smaller facilities, whereas the newer facilities that were a little bit more robust had more like 17, 18, 19, 20% usage.
Because there's more to do.
Correct.
So it's appealing to more.
It appeals to more people, and that's something we emphasized. And when we sat down with Think, we said, it needs to be. It can't be as large as Provo, different tax base, different user base, but it needs to have something in it to appeal to a lot of different people, so that you can generate enough membership revenue to make it self-sustaining. And so that's why as we get into their portion of it, the think portion of it, where they put together some preliminary concepts, the emphasis was multi-use spaces. So not one dedicated space for every single possible use, because that's how you end up with a 200,000 square foot facility that costs too much to build. But how do you put in a lot of spaces that can be used differently at 10 a.m. than they might be at 6 p.m.? So based upon all of our research, we put together our demand assessment. And really what we found was there's significant demand, a lot of it driven by young families for certain recreational amenities, pools, primarily for family and recreational use, and lap swimming. All of the research we did, the different ways we did it, pools kept coming to the top. There's communities we work in where we're told right off the bat, you're gonna hear a bunch of people talk about pools. We don't wanna do that. We know pools are expensive. There's a lot of costs associated with them. But in this case, the response pro pool and wanting a pool, the amount of people that are leaving to use pools elsewhere, really just brought it to the top, to the point where we think it's really important that there is a pool component in this facility for it to really meet the needs of your community. Gymnasiums. So again, so I think one of the comments earlier was we have enough basketball courts. We don't think of it as just basketball courts. It's multi-purpose gymnasium space. And that is really valuable multi-use space, whether it's basketball, volleyball, pickleball, or other non-sports uses as well. It can be meeting and gathering space. Indoor walking and jogging track, everything that would go into a typical public fitness center. So cardio, free weights, strength equipment, workout classes are very important. Having a robust class program. And actually when we talk about private providers of fitness programs, a lot of them actually work through public recreation centers where they actually have private contractors, third-party contractors that actually run a lot of those classes, pay a fee to host their classes within the facility. And then, there's actual private individuals and private businesses that run those. That's a very common model, especially here in Utah. And then we also found some need for some sort of rock climbing wall or bouldering feature, which can be easily integrated into the design of the facility. From a program standpoint, again, youth sports programs, youth camps, youth clinics, things like that were very popular. And then on the adult side, adult fitness programs and classes were very popular. We also found quite a bit of demand for adult sports programs. So when we talk about sports, we talk a lot about club sports and youth sports. But there's a lot of adults out there that want to be able to still participate in basketball leagues and volleyball leagues and things like that, even though their glory days might be over.
They think,
yeah. Mine are definitely over, I can tell you that much. In terms of our operating pro forma, in this case, we knew right off the bat that, hey, can this be self-sustaining is gonna be a very important factor for this. Everything we just that think has laid out as concepts for this facility. We think about the size of the facility, the way it operates, the multi-use of it, all the different programming. The emphasis is really on, can this be one that's self-sustainable? And we do believe it is. Given the growth trends in this community, the presence of families, the strong responses of the survey in terms of interest in paying membership fees, things like that.
This doesn't include the bond.
No. So this, that's a great point. This is
operational.
Here the operation.
So again, we keep those two buckets. We try to keep them separate to make decisions on
and
each.
this is based on the 15% adoption at the previous numbers, 200 and 400 roughly.
Yes, correct.
For family and individual.
Exactly. So it's based on the numbers we tested. We don't want to project this as some kind of unicorn outlier, right? We want our numbers to be solid within the range of what we've seen from comparable facilities and comparable communities, adjusting for what we've heard from your community and what we see in terms of your demographics and socioeconomics.
Just again on the record, the bond is paid for by a property tax increase and the operating cost is paid for by
the operation
like a fee, membership fee.
Yeah.
So just getting it on the record.
Right. And any shortfall comes out of the general fund.
And if the fees do not meet the operating
Typically, yes.
expense, then it has to be covered by the operating.
Well, like the first couple of years that you're showing, right?
Yeah. So this is a stabilized year of operations. This is year 3. So typically there is some ramp up phase. As you introduce the facility, start selling memberships, people begin to adopt usage of the facility, change their patterns.
I was going to ask that. Do you see a spike at the beginning and then it back down, or does it take time to ramp up to a 15%?
Typically, we see a ramp up with these types of facilities, yeah.
Okay.
You know, by year 3, usually within the first 18 months or so, you know, you kind of start to get people to, the hard part is when it comes to fitness, when it comes to recreation, when it comes to families, the hardest part is just simply changing their patterns and changing their schedules. So there is kind of an 18-month period there where you'll see that change, 18 to 24 months.
And most of that's because they're already involved in another community's programs. So
Exactly.
it takes them,
Yeah.
you know, we love this program. We're gonna wait until this season's over. We'll slowly move
transfer.
over. Yeah.
Correct, yeah. Thank you. And as you can see, look at the operating revenues on the slide. You know, of the 2.2 million roughly in projected revenue, 1.7 of that is memberships. So that's what it's all about when it comes to self-sustaining is having enough things in this building that appeal to the community for them to commit to that membership.
Just for the record, the non-resident membership, annual, monthly, daily, was that based on that 400, or is that a prorated that takes the tax increase plus? Because we wanted to, remember we talked about that.
Yeah, so we put together a pricing model that backs this up where, and again, this is common at other facilities in Utah County. Right now, your residents, when they go to most other cities, rec centers, are paying a higher
Not the
fee.
full amount. Not the same. So like if I go to Lehigh right now, I pay less to use the Lehigh Rec Center than a resident of Lehigh because their taxes and their membership fee combined is more than my membership fee.
Oh, if you factor in the taxes, correct. Yes.
So we want to make sure that nothing against Eagle Mountain, love Eagle Mountain. We love them shopping in our city. We're going to love them coming to our rec center. But
Their fee
the
should account for both
400
of those.
The $240 increase in my property taxes needs to be added. So their fee should be 400 for a family, 469 plus 240
Gotcha, yeah.
is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and these, I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, but your revenue projections are based off of if we run the facility as you recommend,
Correct.
right? But most don't.
It depends. And that was kind of the point I started to make earlier is every community makes a decision very early on in this process, how much they want to charge, essentially.
Okay.
And I've gone into projects where they say, as long as we get to 80% cost recovery, that's probably enough. But again, it depends on the community and what their expectation is for the facility. And we've worked on plenty too, where they say, you know, this needs to be operationally self-sustaining. I just don't think we're going to have this support for this long term. And there's been times we've looked at and said, given your demographics, given what you can afford to build, given other market factors, you know, you're probably looking at a cost recovery, not a positive operating income. And the project stalled there. And that's fine because that's what we're paid to do is figure out, does this make sense for you?
Right. And when you get into operating expenses, does it get granular? Do you look at it granularly enough to say salary, wages and benefits? Well, some of that's covered by the city's HR budget, or they need IT work done in the building that's covered by the city's IT budget. Do you look at it as a standalone?
We
entity?
allocate every possible cost related to this facility
To the facility. So
The
it's not like
We're not hiding
City
anything
Public
in other
Works is mowing the lawn and not paying for that.
So there's internal cross charge. They've counted for the.
Yeah, so
cross-charging.
we try to be
Okay.
conservative and some communities do this, some don't, but in our model, we show it this way. Where even if it's an HR cost, HR is charging that portion of it to the
Right.
facility.
Okay. 'Cause I mean, I've seen other
Yeah.
rec centers in the state that are profitable,
They're not.
but they're hiding their cross charges.
Yeah, because all of the shared functions are not.
There's
charged.
also some that look incredibly, like there's a huge loss, but then you interview the director and they're like, oh, well, once they realized that this was something where nobody would question. Nobody would question
Hiding other
$500,000 or
expenses.
Yeah,
They actually
$500,000 or
put-
$600,000 a year coming from the general. Oh, that's okay. It's for the recreation center.
IT budget
All
goes
of a
to the rec
sudden-
center.
Yeah, all of a sudden things start popping up in there. Well, we do use the snowplows for making
That's
sure the parking
interesting.
lot's clean. And then
Very
bang.
interesting.
Yeah,
I can see that
Yeah,
actually.
me too. Yeah.
Well,
I'm sure it
a
doesn't
beautiful
surprise us.
city
Yeah.
center in Eagle Mountain was built on the utility fund.
Well, I mean, I look at it the 100% opposite way of that. I
Yeah.
want it to be Everything
yes.
cross-charged,
Well,
right?
Eagle Mountain City Hall and Library was built off their utility fund. And then they rented from them their city hall. But I just want to point out real quick, I know that we're probably wrapping up soon, but the reason why we've initiated this study and we actually spent money on it is because there was a lot of clamor in the community that they were going to do a referendum. So not that we're trying to keep the residents from doing referendums, that's fine. Initial and, residents being, taking the initiative is great, but they often can be ill-informed. They could do the wrong dollar amounts. They wouldn't spend the money to do a study to find out really what the costs are.
Rumors tend to run.
And then so when it goes on the ballot, people are voting for something and they're voting for a rec center that is going to be 8,000 square feet.
50% funded. Yeah.
Well, it'll be 8,000 square feet. And then we don't build it, or we do build one basketball court and they get mad at the council for doing something wrong. So we're not trying to beat them. We're trying to help them be accurate. And we want to make sure that the residents are voting on something, because most likely this is going to go to a vote to the residents. This is something that we've talked about, is this type of thing needs to be chosen when there's a huge property tax increase. I mean, huge, it's still 40, 60, 40%. It's still $240 a year. We want the residents to, vote on that. We want to make sure that they had all of the details, all of the information accurately so they can make an informed, educated decision. And so when we're asking these clarification questions, like, is this to the minute detail, is because when residents will call us and say, is this to the minute detail? We're predicting those questions.
Right.
So that's why we're asking, because I personally I'm going to take a neutral stance. I think residents should make a decision, but I'm going to give them all of the information, both sides, so that they can make an informed decision.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I? One thing I wanted to add, I think our city manager, Mark Christensen, said this before, and I thought it was really well said, that you guys aren't financially rewarded if we build not a cost center, a rec center, because it is a cost center. That Freudian slip there. But you're not compensated if we build a rec center. You're not getting awarded anything. And this really provides a tool. Whether the residents use it or not, that's up to them, but it provides a tool that you can have a rational conversation.
Exactly.
Regardless of tool there's a lot of people won't ever have a rational conversation, but there's so many people, this is going to cost $10,000. And some people are like, well, look at Provo, they're rolling in the dough there, which, so it provides the residents who are going to vote on it to have a rational decision of what this is really going to be. And I agree with Councilman McComber. It's much better to give the residents information so they can make a decision based upon a professional, an informed decision versus what, a traffic study engineer from Facebook says that it'll cost. So.
Yeah. And that's why we do studies in so many states, honestly, is because we do the studies and we don't make money. We don't build the facility. We don't operate the facility. We don't, all we do is help communities determine, is this feasible or not for our community based upon our goals.
And I wanted to, sorry, it took me a while to get my mic turned on.
That was the purpose.
I wanted to piggyback on what Councilman McComber and Councilman Wilden said, and that, that this has been thought out. We've brought in an architect that has done these before, and to design something that's actually feasible, so that we're not, if the residents decide to use this information, that they're not proposing something that isn't financially feasible as from an operating standpoint and doesn't meet the needs of the city. We've put in the time and due diligence so that if this is approved by the voters, that they are able to rely on the fact that what they're going to get is something that will actually work.
Yeah, it's important that they're voting on something that is viable for the long term in the community.
That's a good word.
Yeah. Right. So
I don't know if it's too late to try and reflect this in this report, but I'd like the numbers to reflect the higher non-resident rates in the revenues.
I would too. If we can make an adjustment.
If we can
to
make
the
that adjustment.
32,000 so that we are actually showing that tax.
I think we did do higher numbers, but I will double check.
Just double
that.
check it.
I'm looking at slide 100 in the packet.
Yeah.
And you have non-resident annual rates for family at 500, annual residents at 475. It's only $25 difference.
it doesn't reflect if you want them to pay
I
for
want the
the,
property tax included in that.
which that, not to get into the math too much, but that
Average.
would be
Yeah,
lower
average.
once you blend in additional.
Yep.
But yeah, okay, we can.
Yeah,
run
that needs
again.
to be captured. Well,
So-
because that's gonna, I mean, right now we're at 100, these projections have it 109%. It'll be higher than that if we reflect those costs correctly.
Right, but then that, if we end up hitting at 12% or 9%,
True.
then that balances it
could,
out, right?
yeah.
So I would rather shoot at 109, 115 because reality always is like every business model, you never hit those numbers, right? You always get
But
less.
the question is like, so if you're trying to capture that property tax for a non-resident,
Yep.
is that going towards the paying off the bond or operating costs? Because that's going to be reflected in operating
It
costs.
sounds to me like it's more an element of
More of an-
fairness.
It's an element of fairness, and so
Yeah.
I would rather have it go to the
Toward
operating
the
cost.
operating, okay.
Yeah.
Because
So to make the math simple, you're suggesting that whatever the monthly rate is, their rate ought to be about $20 more per month if it's that 240 number per year.
if that's what we go with, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's her. city
I mean, there needs to be like some business modeling around it too, because if we have excess capacity, say 25% excess
Right.
capacity, and Eagle Mountain residents can come in, or Bluffdale or Lehigh or whatever, if it makes it so cost prohibitive that they don't
Right.
That they
come
don't
in,
come, correct.
then the residents are actually losing that additional revenue from the Eagle Mountain. So
There
just
is a
going
world where they
from-
just drive to Lehigh and they bypass the facility entirely because.
But
of the
Lehigh, as soon
price.
as we do it, we'll change their model.
I'm just saying, if you make it so high and you lose out on that 25% capacity,
Nope.
we're just throwing.
At the end, when it
revenue
comes
away.
to pricing, you're ultimately kind of held to what all of your competitors are doing. So if your fee.
And what the
for out
market
of-
will allow.
What the market will allow. So if your fee ends up being, what'd you say, $20 a month, $240 a year.
$20 more a month.
Yeah, ends up being $20 more a month. And let's say that's $15 more a month than going to Lehigh. There's a certain portion that's just going to drive past. and go to
Unless their
Lehigh.
gas prices keep going.
True.
Yeah, I mean,
That's market force.
But that's why we
Yeah.
try to show a
But to Stephen's point, that's
stabilized
the
year of
market
operations.
analysis.
yeah. Well, and to be clear, they should pay more, and it'd be perfect to recover the whole property tax component, but the market might not support it, and then we're just throwing the money out because we've
And
crossed it.
That's why we try to show a stabilized year of operations, because it gives time for for adjustments during those first 2 years. There are always adjustments to the business model based upon what you see in reality. So
It's just hard to raise prices later.
I would suggest though, whatever we put in there, we put a more conservative amount, so it doesn't make it look like we're
what's
making
reflected
even
now,
more
yeah.
profit than what it already says there.
I think it's to the point of Lehigh, their residents are already asking for another rec center because the Legacy Center is overcrowded, overpopulated. They'd probably follow that suit. So they're not going to drive past us because Lehigh's got its own problems with
They're kicking
growing
us out.
community.
And I guess what I'm suggesting in this study though, is I'd rather keep it a lower amount right now because it gives us a more conservative.
I would
number.
generally speaking, I would agree with
So
that.
like $10.
Because if we're inflating it by a whole bunch and it looks like, hey, we're gonna make 200,000 or 300,000 or 400,000, whatever it ends up being, that's gonna.
That's a good point.
It's not going to be a dollar for dollar as well, because I do think you're right. Over a certain price point, you do start to lose usage rates. Yeah.
Just from a presentation, I would prefer to keep it as is unless you have a model predict something slightly.
But in a
tweaks,
community growing faster than we want to grow because of market, we'll fill up our own capacity in no time.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think at this point, it might make sense to skip to your concepts.
Yeah, this is what the youth council want to look at. This is the fun stuff.
That's right, the pretty pictures.
They're like numbers. Oh. Parents and their numbers.
All right, we'll back up a little bit then.
Let's talk about facilities now.
All right.
These are concepts, youth. Don't go to Westlake tomorrow and say, we're getting a lap pool.
So we did these based on the survey and what people wanted and based on what council directed us to do, which was create a lot of multi-use spaces. So right now we have, a nice leisure pool with some lap lanes and a lazy river, zero entry for more of a family use, younger kids. Then we have on the opposite side, we have lap pool, we're seeing a lot of trends with the lap pools to add in amenities for the teens for fun stuff to do, like ninja courses and fun stuff like that.
Do they come down from the ceiling?
That come down from the ceiling. And we've kind of modeled that into our cost model when we've figured out, okay, let's make this a multi-generational facility, right? So back on the top of the page there on M, that's multi-use space that can be used for group workouts or for senior dinners, whatever, right? So that it's not a specific, hey, this is only for cycling or whatever, right?
The key to that is a lot of flooring surfaces that are multi-purpose.
Yep.
being Durable. I mean, that's a big part of it. Having divider walls so you can
Yes.
change the size of the room, things like that.
So then just below that, you'll see we've got a teen space. That's becoming very popular in rec centers now, where they'll put TVs on the walls, let kids play video games, whatever, while mom and dad are upstairs working out and younger brothers playing basketball. We've also done some little food area next to that, and then some rental rooms, party rooms that are just off of the leisure pool that also are accessible from the main gym or the dry side of that as well. The gymnasium area will do 3 high school basketball courts or 1 NBA sized basketball court if you ever decide to throw some crazy function at this.
Championship game.
That's right. The Saratoga League championship games.
Hey, we have a jazz player who comes every year, and we can for
right.
our junior jazz. So.
That's right. As well as there's a kind of a pink and green spot there for the kids area that would be sort of a daycare area. Second floor, this is always a space to capture. The second floor is always a cheaper space. We try and program that as much as possible because you have a roof, you have a floor, now you're throwing another floor into it to gain that cheaper space. We've got, I'm pointing at us as you can see me, right? We've got turf there in Q. In O is more of your cardio space where you'd have all of your ellipticals, treadmills, all of that. You circle down the blue going around is your track. It's elevated.
How big is the indoor turf and what is it used for?
Turf is used a lot for cross training. And it's what is that? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 yard. You'll see a lot of CrossFit areas there. We're seeing a lot.
Resistance training.
Yeah.
Flipping tires and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of that in the private sector. They're using a lot of that. They'll go and stretch on that because they don't like stretching on the rubber floor.
Okay.
So they'll go stretch on the turf instead. So it's kind of frustrating to a lot of the private people, but
operating on a facility like this, which is very possible.
Like football trainers will use that a lot.
Yeah. For sprint and athletic training, but we're also seeing a lot of synthetic turf used for classes and fitness areas as well, for miscellaneous uses such as yoga and aerobics.
Makes sense. Like goat yoga. Yeah, except for goat yoga.
goat yoga. Yep. As long as it's cleanable.
All right.
N is your free weight area. Very controlled. You don't want 5-year-olds going in there and trying to lift. So a controlled area. Down below that is an outdoor recreation area, outdoor group training, yoga, whatever you want to program that as. But one of the things that Heston and Owen asked was, let's put something out there that's a programmable space rather than just a roof.
Well, and it's going to have amazing views. So that's
Yeah.
going to be, I think it's going to be a popular yoga, aerobics, lots of things out there. It's going to be very popular. It basically overlooks the lake.
It does. So, which we'll show you here.
See, there it is.
So this is kind of, we've had discussions that we know there's another feasibility study going on out there for putting in hot springs area in right where we're showing this. So we've been asked to combine those two into a single area where all the recreation is going to happen.
And we believe there could be cost savings both on the construction side by taking two separate projects and putting them into one facility, as well as cost savings on the operational side, because you're not gonna have to duplicate staff, duplicate expenses at each. You can combine and.
Yeah.
And we,
share additional
we may
costs.
have covered this on the prelim discussion, but do your cost estimates take into account the outdoor portion as well?
No, so the model that we put together was for the indoor facility. And then only at this stage, as we got into concepts and talked through some of this with you all at the retreat, did we say, you know what? We don't know enough about that other concept yet
Okay.
that's currently being studied to run them on off it, but.
So we're looking at
certainly-
potentially
we
10 to
certainly
15
could.
million more for the outdoor piece.
Well, if we just do if we do have all the pools inside and we just do the wading pools, it's gonna be a lot less. But if we end up
Yeah.
doing more.
No, we do
splash
kind of what we
pad,
talked about in the past for that outdoor facility. That's true. There's some cost savings there.
We
Yeah.
would have to, and think as well, would have to look at the results of that other study. And
Sure.
Look at how we combine, they could look at how we combine structurally.
Okay.
And on this, and on the space layout, and we could look at how you combine the operating model.
So your image, B is not included in any of your numbers.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
That's why we put it. we moved that to
Yep,
the end.
that's good. Thank you.
Here's the police station. So that's proposed.
Yeah. Moving to the end. We've tried to kind of model the pools around that and use that thermal that you're going to get out of those hot springs and overlook the lake, which is going to be an incredible view. So we try to take that into account.
Yeah. But these would
Where on this is your roof space you're talking about? Is it
Number
or six?
four. Number
Okay.
4.
I think there are things you can do in terms of building as well. As you look at the way that these two pools, or on the indoor side, the lap pool and then the recreational pool, the way they're oriented, again, towards the view, when you have these outdoor pools, there's things you can do in terms of
doors.
doors.
Roll
big
up
garages.
doors.
We went
yeah.
and toured Washington.
Oh,
Yeah,
perfect.
Washington's
Okay.
is.
They
yeah.
have amazing
Right.
system to.
Indoor,
open that-
outdoor space.
How they open
Yeah.
that up to just.
So it's, in the winter, it might just be indoor.
Right.
If you have hot tubs, there's gonna be some.
They even
outdoors.
thought it was worthy to have the doors closed when we were there and it was 58 degrees.
Right.
We were all
Yeah,
thinking
right.
it was super warm, but
Right.
they all were in jackets.
Yes, my mother lives there and she wears a coat year round. Sorry, Mom.
Yeah, so that is our presentation. Any other questions for us at this point?
Really appreciate the details. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the work. It's helpful.
As long as you don't stump us, you're allowed to ask as many questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Closed session. You say you adjourn the meeting.
No, Mayor, so this is a great presentation. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, thank you for that. This is obviously the first step. So now I have to refine, as we talked about, if we want to combine the ideas of hot springs along with the facility. And so now it's refining the ideas and then getting it out for people to consider for ballot initiative, if that's what, or measure, if that's what you want as a council. But those discussions are the next steps.
Okay, so it's February. To be on the ballot, it's got to be by June, right?
Correct.
Is that about
It
right?
would, yeah, it would have to be 75 days before the election,
Okay.
Kevin.
So are we looking at another 60 days from now to get? I thought we talked about putting some semi-real numbers with a contractor behind some of this, or was that for the City Hall Library?
That was for the other,
Okay.
yeah, that was for the other building.
Okay,
That
so
was-
so
that
really
was
what
more
we need
just
to
an
do is
estimate.
figure out what the outdoor piece would add to these
Yes.
numbers.
Correct. Yep.
And then add 15%. Well, I mean, and then cushion it, right? I mean, we need
Right.
to have contingency dollars. and-
Well, we kind of had a back of the napkin number on that without the rest of the facility. Yeah,
I think we're more at that 40% number. The 240 is where we're probably hitting.
For both?
for both.
Both. Because they were, if you look at their numbers, I mean, they said that we could easily do it for the 20%. 20 or 30%. I think their number is based on the 30%. It is, it's based on 30.
I wouldn't want to put it out there in
Just for
shortfall.
the building, the indoor, you base it on 30%, the tax on 30%. Roughly 30%
Yeah.
property tax increase to build the building. So I'm saying another 10% for the few outlets, right? the outside.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
So I'm saying it'll take another 10% in tax increase.
Mhm.
If we're asked to kind of combine.
Yeah,
those numbers
roughly.
from a building standpoint and an operations standpoint, I think it would make sense if we could also pull in a cost estimator to get some more detailed numbers based upon what's been happening.
Right.
The more knowledge we
At
can
this point,
provide,
we
the
do
better.
it month by month, what those are cost prices.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to undershoot the number.
That's meaning.
That's worst case scenario.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's gonna,
If it's going to go to a ballot,
I think the ballot's gonna be,
right.
I think the ballot's gonna be the 40, maybe 45, but we need to get these numbers. but
60, yeah.
Yeah, we need some.
I
more
don't think
from-
it'll make it to
yeah.
60 for the outdoor facility, because you gotta remember, the teenagers gone, the lap pool's gone, it's all inside.
Right.
All we have really is the wade pools and then maybe a splash pad, like that out by there.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we
And then
need to-
theirs doesn't take into account the potential savings for the
Don't,
heating.
but don't shortchange the size needed of an outdoor year-round facility.
I think
And that's the information we still need to collect is what does the outdoor portion look like?
Right.
And then
Well,
bring that
I
back.
mean, if we want to put a teenage pool outside too, and have, we need to have that conversation and if we're presenting to the residents, I just think that we can't, I don't think it's fair to the referendum residents if we make something so big and grand, it makes it
Yeah, yeah.
60%,
No,
so
I
we get it to
agree.
fail.
I agree, but I also don't want to come in
Underestimate it.
short, right? Because I do think that historically, the Saratoga Spring Resort, if we could try and play off of that and having a year-round outdoor option, I think will be a big play for our residents.
Well, I think it seals the deal. I think it passes for sure if there's an outdoor year-round recreation, because we're also pulling in now Lehigh residents who have legacy farms who want to go to our pool. I mean, we're pulling in, the Legacy Center, we're pulling in a lot more because we're unique. We're not just like every other rec center out there.
We gotta figure out where to put the Macomber Ferris wheel and the Paduska merry-go-round.
Yeah. The Ferris wheel that blew over in the wind. Thanks. So there was a Ferris wheel at Saratoga, the resort. There's a big Ferris wheel and blew over in the wind because we get wind.
It's
out
never windy here.
It's never windy. That's when they decided to build houses.
I'm good.
That's when they decided to build houses instead.
Mayor and council, what I'm hearing is as staff will get the teams together, we'll do some coordinating efforts and we'll bring back some additional information to you. Meanwhile, obviously, we wanted to make sure that this information was made available to the public and available for us as a community to start to consider it. And so we'll work with our consultants on trying to nail down some of those costs. One thing that was not spoken of is that we've been doing some research on the geothermal, and part of our hope is that we can really capture the geothermal technology there for heat exchange pumps and other things to try and drive down the operations costs of this, especially utilizing that unique feature here for our community. So we'll get rolling on that and we'll start getting information back to you as soon as it becomes available.
The geothermal for the youth council, there we have a ton of hot water under the ground here. That's why it's Saratoga Springs. That's where it got its original name. And there's some natural hot springs even. A lot of teenagers like to go to it. We have here in the city, but we're going to tap into that to heat our buildings and heat our water. And save money, hopefully.
It's a very sustainable option for us in looking at this. So it's part of the endeavor.
Thank you, Mark, for bringing that up.
All right, meeting adjourned.
Good job. Good job.
Yes, thank you.